You could easily give up. And I think probably in the first year or so I could have easily given up, I think, because it was hard work. There were classes that I came across that wouldn't do anything I wanted them to do.
Number one is passion.
Yeah,
because that's what I'm trying to get at, is having that passion.
Yeah.
Now, whatever you want to do, you have to have that passion.
I was quite stubborn, I think. I was quite determined.
Alhamdulillah, God gave me everything. Alhamdulillah.
You make a choice and say, come hell or high water, I'm going to do this, then you should not be surprised when you are that. And I gave my soul to this game. There's nothing more I can give.
Everest is obvious to climb because it's there, it's a mountain. Personal Everest, you can't see it. No one can see it but you. Never give up on a dream.
Just look deep within myself and ask myself how much I want it. What am I here for? Don't lose that desire. I want to unleash the beast.
When I sat here in this crowd, US 93, and saw all these guys, I realized it's there. It's there for the taking if I put the time in.
Be true to the game, because the game will be true to you. If you try to shortcut the game, then the game's gonna shortcut you.
Welcome to Steer the Game. Today we've got Mike on the podcast, a teacher, a deputy head, and a political campaigner. Thank you for coming on.
Okay, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Before we get into your whole story, let's talk about your childhood and how you got kind of raised and the environment you grew up in.
Okay, I was born in Bristol in the 1950s, so I was born to a working class family. My dad worked in a local aircraft factory. My mum was a housewife, had a brother, and I went to school in Bristol. Bristol was a comprehensive education system in the 1960s, so I benefited from that. We didn't have the 11 plus. I didn't have a choice between grammar school and secondary modern. I went to a comprehensive school, and that was my early life really.
But so obviously you told me off camera that your parents, they stopped going to school at 14 years old.
Yes.
They were thrown into the industry basically.
That's right. I mean, they grew up in the 1930s, so they both left school just before the war. The school leaving age was 14 then for most children. They went straight into work at 14. My dad went into the aircraft factory at 14, where he worked for his whole life. My mum went to work at 14. She worked in a bakery and worked in a chemist shop and things like that. And that happened during the war. And eventually my mum went to work in the same factory as my dad during the war. So their experience was quite different from mine. They'd left school without any qualifications. And because of that, they were very keen that we made the most of our education and we got good qualifications, but also that we ended up with a good job with good prospects.
But looking back, how was your early childhood? Because obviously that's in the post-war period. And it's only 15, 20 years after the war. Yeah. So how was you kind of growing up and navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware of anything and any of the problems that were there really. I had a great childhood. I lived in Bristol, in a suburb. We had lots of green space. I spent most of my time out in the local park playing football with my friends growing up. I wasn't really aware of it. Was tight. It was financially difficult for my parents. They were buying a house. Just my dad working. A lot of their money went on that. They didn't have any spare cash. But at the time you don't realise because they're giving you the things that you need and you're growing up and you're not really aware, but you become aware of it as you get older. So as a teenager I was aware of it more because they didn't have any spare money to do it. We were comfortably off, but we didn't have any spare cash. But and because they'd grown up in the war, they didn't want to waste anything, everything. There was no waste, so no clothes were patched, things were repaired, food wasn't wasted because they'd grown up and lived with rationing and living in quite a difficult situation.
So you mentioned that in your teenage years that's when you kind of realised the actual situation. Yeah. And how did that kind of make you feel? Did that give you the extra drive and that passion to kind of push forward with your life and try to go above and beyond? Yeah,
I mean, I wanted from quite an early age. I wanted to go to university. I thought that was the right thing to do. Nobody in my family had been to university at that point. My cousin, who was a couple of years older than me, he went to university just before me, but nobody else in our families had gone to university because it was never even considered really. So it gave me the drive to do well in my, it wasn't GCSEs then, it was O-levels and my A-levels, so that I could go to university.
But where was that epiphany? Because obviously there's one thing, like even the mention of university, but then how did it come within you that that's my desire to actually get there?
That's a good question. I think I wanted to do well academically. I mean, I was really into sport as a teenager. I played loads of sport. I played rugby, I played football, I played cricket. I played every possible sport I could. Played for the school in all those things. So I was really into sport. So I wasn't particularly always focused on academic stuff all the time. But I knew that I wanted to get on and do well. And so as I got older, I wanted to do A levels. A lot of people in my school went to university. I think that was part of the inspiration. I'm not sure if it was an epiphany or just a gradual realization that I wanted to do that, because I saw that as being the thing I wanted to get on and achieve those things.
So how were you academically? Like, were you always like a bright student, or like, was it something that kind of came like a struggle to you?
No, I suppose I was always. I mean, looking back, I was always quite good academic. I was always good at maths. I know I'm not ended up doing maths, but I was always really good at maths. I was sort of the top student in maths in my secondary school when I was younger, in sort of years 7, 8, and 9. I liked most things, so I suppose I was quite good academically.
Yeah. So then, was revision like working in schooling, like going through your O-levels, and was that a struggle at all? Or was it
it was a struggle. Absolutely a struggle. I had to work really hard, to get there, because I was determined I was going to get the best grades that I could, and so I worked really hard. It was a struggle, and I didn't have the advantage, I suppose, of somewhere easy to study. I had a table in my bedroom. I had the box room in the house, a small bedroom, so I didn't really have much space to study. But I took it seriously.
Yeah. But then, like, when you're looking at your dad, like, I'm trying to take you back.
Space, that's fine. Yeah.
When you look at your dad and like your mom, when they're working, doing full-time jobs and actually getting money, and you're kind of exploring this university route that's kind of unknown and hasn't really been tried before. Yeah. Was there ever like a feeling of like, I start this, I'll just go straight into whatever they're doing and just work in the industry? Like, as you're going through your A-levels university?
No, not really. I suppose it was a time during A-levels when I found it really quite hard to concentrate and get on with the work, because it was quite daunting. But no, not really. I mean, I think...
But how do you push past that? So when it got daunting and it got a bit hard, how did you kind of like stay driven and stay on course?
I think I just did it. I just carried on, really. I mean, I think...
Plodded away.
I wanted to get to university. I wanted to do that, and
there's no like second thought of I just fall back into what my dad's doing or what my mom's doing.
No, and I mean, because I had the opportunities they didn't have. I had the opportunity to get qualifications. They'd left school without any qualifications, so the only jobs they could go into were jobs that didn't require qualifications. And at the time, there were lots of jobs, of course, a lot more jobs than there were in industry when I was growing up, and a lot more jobs when I was growing up than there are now.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get qualifications.
But, like, obviously, that's the overall feeling. But what I'm trying to get at is, it's all well and good having like that dream and that goal. Yeah. But then when like everyone kind of goes through the same struggle, like when it comes to the actual grind and the toil, like you always meet a certain resistance, and then you gotta push past it. Yeah. So for you, I feel like the resistance was like when you felt a bit daunting, and then you stayed on track. Yeah. When you say you just did it, like how did that kind of come about? If you can take us back. Or was it just like you just done it?
I don't know. I think I.
Do you get what
I do. Yeah. When I was doing my A levels, there was a time when I had to make myself go into my bedroom and do it. I think, and I didn't really want to, because there were lots of other distractions. You know, particularly when you're 17, 18. There's a lot of going out with friends. You know, playing sport. Going to pubs, that sort of stuff, which me and my friends used to do. There were lots of distractions, but I had to work hard at it. And probably I didn't get the A-level grades I should have done. Probably I didn't do as well as I probably should have done. I got enough to go to university, but I didn't get probably the grades I should have done.
How did that make you feel though? So once you got that result and you realised like it might be nip and tuck to actually get into university itself?
Yeah, there were a few days when I was really bothered. So I hadn't got the grades I had to get to university. I hadn't quite got. So and in those days, it took a few days to find out whether I got in or not. And I had got in, but for a few days it was I was bothered about it.
Where did kind of religion come into it to study in that university? Or like what degree were you actually doing?
I did theology.
Theology?
Yeah, which was mostly about the Christian religion at the time. And I wish there had been more content about other faiths, because when I became a teacher, I needed to know that, and it would have been good if there had been more. I think I was my family were Christian. We went to church. My family went to church. I went to Sunday school. That influenced me a lot, I think, in the values I had. There's some really good people that taught me at Sunday school or ran the youth club that I got to know really well, and I respected.
What sort of values? Just talk us through some.
Respect for other people, self-respect, caring for others, truth, fairness, those sort of things. Sort of basic Christian values that influenced me a lot, I think. So I was involved in religion. I did RE at school. I did RE A-level at school. I was interested in discussing the questions. That's what I really liked. A lot of the course we did was Bible study, and that was okay. But I really enjoyed it when we got the chance to debate and argue about, is there a God? How are all people equal? Is there life after death? That sort of stuff. Those are the things I was really interested in. So that's what inspired me to want to do theology, because I was interested in discussing the questions.
But was that always in your parents' kind of plan? Because that's kind of like off course in terms of any degree to take.
My parents were great about it looking back, because I think they saw A levels and university as an opportunity to get a good career. So when I said I wanted to go to university, I think their first thought was I would go and train.
So did that come from yourself, saying to them that I want to go to university?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly when, but it was a sort of sometime when I was at secondary school, probably a bit later, years.
So you had that self-discovery yourself?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like your parents kind of mentioned it to you kind of growing up and it was that overriding thing?
No.
But it came from you that you actually want to go above and beyond what they did?
They'd had no experience of university. They probably knew nothing about universities, to be honest. Well, they knew a bit about them, but not about what they did. So they thought when I went if I went to university, I would go to university and train for a career. I would do something that was very much related to a career, because they wanted me to have a good career, because that was the opportunity they didn't get. So when I said I wanted to study religion, they said, well, is that because you want to be a Christian minister? And I was saying, well, possibly, but that's not the reason why I want to do it. I want to do it because I want to go there and study religion. And that was quite hard for them to understand, I think.
Was that a hard decision for you? Because obviously like the balance of it in terms of like there's a case where you could stomach it and just do like a harder degree that will actually get you a career where like a WAGON career, for example, or go off your own back and do what you like, what you enjoy, and then kind of go forward from that. Like, was it that yin and yang? Like, how did that kind of come about?
Well, I was quite stubborn. I think I was quite determined that I was going to go and do that. But they talked to me about that, about whether had I thought about doing a career. My dad was saying, why don't you go in the forces and do a degree that way? And I can see where he was coming from. But at the time, that was the last thing I wanted to do. To go
in. Confidence?
I don't know really. I was.
Do you get where I'm coming from? That's a big decision, especially when you're the first of your family going to university.
Yeah, my cousin had been a couple of years before, so that was sort of that.
What I mean, like your household.
Oh, my household, yeah. I don't know. I just do.
I think about it at all.
I don't know. I know. I suppose I was quite stubborn about it, really. But I explained why I wanted to do it, and they were good about it. To be honest, they were okay about it. And once I got there, and I was doing okay, they were fine then. They were fine about it. But looking back, they were very good about the fact that I wanted to go and do something which didn't lead to a career
at the time.
Yeah,
because like when I'm looking at it outside in, it looks like a massive decision. Yeah, because like as I explained to you before, the yin and yang of it, like it doesn't really make any sense. Yeah, like for the long term kind of like trajectory.
Yeah, I was pretty a pretty determined, stubborn 18-year-old. Really, I didn't know. There was no way I was going to go and do something I didn't want to do.
But I think that's a good value to have. Yeah. Because explain it yourself. Like, do you feel like looking back, that was the best thing to do in terms of staying determined and staying driven?
Yeah, it was. It was. Yeah, yeah.
Why?
Well, because everybody needs to have an idea, a vision about where they want to go, and obviously you can't just be selfish about it and do what you want to do without considering other people. But I think you have to have a goal in life. You have to have an aim, and I wanted to go to university. I didn't know what I wanted. At that time I didn't know I wanted to be a teacher, to be honest. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with that. As I say, I thought a bit about do I want to be a Christian minister, and I realised quite quickly that I didn't. So yeah, but I was driven because I was driven by wanting to go to university.
Yeah, and driven by what you enjoy.
Yeah,
I think number one is passion.
Yeah,
because that's what I'm trying to get at. It's having that passion.
Yeah,
whatever you want to do, you have to have that passion towards it. Otherwise, I feel like there's no point.
Yeah,
like that old age-old cliche of like no passion, no point. I feel like you have to have that passion and that desire, and that's the only way. Like you kind of number one enjoy things.
Yeah.
And number two, you actually kind of get something.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah.
So then, what would you like before going into uni, having the expectation of what uni would be like in terms of what everyone's telling you, and then what uni actually was?
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, if I'm being honest. I knew I'd be studying, but going there, I think this is sort of relevant. First I went there, I met somebody, the first few days I was there, so I met somebody, we were talking about schools, and he said, what school do you go to? And I said, I went to a comprehensive school. And he was shocked that somebody from a comprehensive school had gone to university, which is very strange because there were other people there from comprehensive school. But I realised that, that I was in a new environment, but I quickly made friends, and friends I've still got now, friends I still see regularly. We went to university together. So,
but did you feel overawed? Like in terms of
a little bit first, certainly overall a bit by leaving home as well, because I stayed away from home and done various things, but I never lived away from home. That was daunting, and at those times not everybody lived in university. So I lived in Bristol, I went to Birmingham. Not everybody lived in Hall. I lived in digs for the first year with a family, and that was quite daunting, fitting in with a new family.
How was that kind of like navigating all of that actual transition from your own family to their family?
Yeah, I would have much rather. I mean, they were great, they were fine, but I would have much rather been in Hall with all the other students. I think I missed out a bit early on, but there just weren't enough places in the Hall in those days for people to.
So if you never got in the Hall, you had to go in digs.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that how it worked?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not sure how everybody applied, and I'm not sure how you were selected for Hall and how you were selected for digs, but I ended up doing that.
So when you found out you were in digs, like, was that kind of a stumbling block that you had to kind of get over?
Yeah, it was disappointing because I knew that the social life bit, a lot of it would be in digs, would be in Hall, but a lot of other people I was friends with at the university also lived in digs in the first year, and the second year I was in Hall anyway. In the university, I was in university accommodation in the second year, so I got to do that as well.
Yeah. So what do you learn from theology as a degree? And was it what you anticipated?
Yes and no. I think. I mean, I was really interested in the philosophical bits, the discussion bits. So in the first year, a lot of it was biblical studies, which I didn't. It was okay, but I didn't really enjoy, and had to learn Greek. So I had to translate. Had to do translations of the Bible from Greek into English, and that was really tough, really tough.
Can you still do that now?
I can do bits of it now, but I could not as well as I could. But that was really tough because at school I'd done French at school, but not very well. So that was the toughest thing I've ever done, having to learn Greek to pass exams, translating stuff from Greek to English. But in the second and third year, you had options. So I chose a lot of the philosophical options. So I was able to do studying. Thinking about religion. So I really enjoyed it. It was great.
What's so intriguing about philosophy? Because I feel like I'm very philosophical with my thinking as well, but to talk to me about yours, your experience with philosophy and how you kind of got brought into it. Was it through your childhood, teenage years, or?
I think it was through childhood. I think it was partly through school. It was partly through doing A-level RE that we had discussions there. It was partly through family. We used to talk about things at home. So that's how I got into it. I mean, I'm just really interested in exploring the questions, the big questions. I really got into doing that. So I really enjoyed doing that part of my degree, and I'm so glad I did it. And I think it helped me later in life now as a teacher as well, because it influenced the way I did it as a teacher.
So then when you say philosophy, what is philosophy to you? So if you had to kind of define it in a word, in a sentence, or?
I think it's
a tough question.
I'm not sure this is a very good answer, but I think it's discussing questions that sort of in a way beyond science, really, are things that science can't answer. So it's sort of metaphysics, really. I know science and philosophy are very linked, but it's discussing those questions which aren't easily answered scientifically. You can't do an experiment to answer them.
So why is it important to you? And what kind of value do you get from it? Like overall thinking, not just philosophy in terms of your university degree, but you mentioned that that's what you took forward on within your life. And I feel like for myself, philosophy it kind of helps you figure out like where your place is, your purpose, and like where you're trying to go. And you actually drive. Like for me, I take philosophy and like thinking in my everyday life in terms of like how I think about others and how I kind of navigate everything. So for you, how does philosophy kind of shape your life?
It's all those things. Also my political views. I think the way I treat people, the way the values that matter to me. I think it's all those things.
Was there a lesson in university where you kind of like realized that philosophy is kind of something I'm gonna take forward, or was it always in the back of your mind that it just kind of happened naturally?
No, I think there was a particular university lecturer that we were taught by. He was a guy called John Hick. He was a well-known philosopher at the time. He wrote some controversial books about Christianity in the 1970s, and he taught us philosophy, and he taught we discussed questions like, is there a God? Is there life after death? What's the meaning of life? Why is there suffering? Those sort of things. And the way he did it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, he did it through. Some of it through lectures, but mostly through discussions. He would sit you down in the room. Actually, what he'd make you do, which was quite daunting, he'd written lots of books about philosophy, so he'd make you read one of his books or a section of one of his books, and then come back and tell him what you thought of it. In a group of three. So you had to read out an essay about his book that he'd written, and he wanted you to be critical about it. He wanted you to raise questions about what he'd written in his book. And that's quite daunting to sit in front of somebody who'd written this quite a famous book, really, and try his own book and raise questions about it. But he was great, and that's what inspired me.
Did that kind of build your confidence? Because if you can do it to his own book and to him, then you can take that forward.
Because once a week there were three of you or four in the room. Once a week, you all each had to write an essay about a philosophical issue. Sometimes it was about something in one of his books, but it wasn't always. And then you each had to read out your essay, and he and the rest of the room would then criticise it.
But how was he developing that yin and yang in terms of like, obviously you said you were born Christian, you were raised Christian. And I feel like Christianity is like a big part of your life. So when the questions like, is God even real? Or like to that kind of extent, how was it like looking at the other point of view, and how do you kind of develop that thinking?
Yeah, it is challenging. I mean, I think it made me I've ended up being an agnostic. I'm not a believer. I'm agnostic now. Possibly even an atheist, because it made me confront those questions. It's questions I hadn't had to. You're brought up with a set of beliefs, and then doing theology at university. Certainly the way that he did it, and some other of our lecturers did it, makes you question your beliefs. And some people rejected what the lecturers were doing with you and said, I'm not even going to go near that. I've got my beliefs and I'm sticking with them.
So what changed for you?
Well, it meant, I doubted some of the stuff that I believed before. I didn't think it was credible to believe some of the things I believed before because of the issues in believing it.
So was that like?
I wasn't expecting that to be the result, but it was the result. I'm happy. I'm not bothered. I'm not unhappy about the fact that was the result. But I think it made me a much better thinker and a much better person. I think, by having to think.
But going through that realization and that kind of I don't know what the word is, but that kind of change in your life from having the fundamental values, like you said before, of Christianity and then beliefs, and also the overall idea of Christianity. Then not through university, but through university, kind of changing your ideas and being a bit more agnostic, as you say. How was that? Because I feel like there's a void there in terms of like what you're actually thinking is. So how was you kind of feeling that void?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I changed my sort of fundamental moral values. I think my moral values are the same as they were before, and a lot of that comes from Christianity. About treating other people well, love your neighbour, those sort of things, which I've been taught as a child, and ideas about equality and not judging others and things like that. Those didn't go away. I still kept those. I think I think in the end, those beliefs end up becoming part of my political view rather than my religious view. So I suppose it's too simple to say this, but I lost my religious faith and perhaps channeled it through different things, really. So in a way, my political views replaced, I guess, my Christian faith, but my values didn't change. And a lot of the values I've got, I think, are linked with my childhood, the way I was brought up, and the way that my experiences as a child.
So then, are your parents really religious?
They were. I mean, both of them are dead now, but they.
I mean, they were like, especially at university. Like, did you speak to them about this? Like, how was that kind of?
No. I didn't really. I don't think I really. That's one thing I should have done and didn't do. They weren't very. They were religious. They weren't very religious. But they were church goers. They were Christians. They had a Christian faith. I don't think I ever told them I didn't believe. I think they probably realised, because I didn't go to church anymore, that I didn't. I wasn't committed.
Like
but
subconscious conversation.
Yeah, but I never really had that conversation about not believing.
So then, how was it dealing on your own? Because you said you never had a conversation with the parents, but did you have a conversation with the brothers, like other people, like, or was it just like something that you took upon yourself?
No, with friends really, and lots of my friends also did theology and went through the same experience as me. They probably came to university believing and were less believing afterwards. Some of them, but I had lots of friends at university who were doing the same course, and we used to I suppose we debate things and discuss things.
So then, how did that teaching art come from? Like going from university to teaching? Because obviously theology is like a facilitated subject where you can do a lot of a varying amount of things.
Yeah.
So how did teaching come about?
I think I want because I enjoyed doing that so much, doing the philosophy stuff so much. I wanted to do the same in school. I wanted to do something similar in school.
What school?
I don't know. It wasn't I didn't sort of grow up with a vocation. I wanted to be a school teacher. I didn't. It sounds like I didn't really drift into it, but I wasn't. It was just something that at the end of university, I thought that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You just kind of come about.
Yeah. But it wasn't something I wasn't a teenager thinking I want to be a school teacher one day. If somebody had asked me when I was 14, what do you want to do? I would have said I want
footballer.
Footballer or do maths. Yeah.
So then, obviously, philosophy kind of. It's clear to see that it was like a big kind of turning point in your life. It kind of shaped who you are.
But maths and philosophy are quite similar, aren't they? They're it's sort of analytical and logic and stuff like that, isn't it? Maybe there's a link between being into maths, which I was as a youngster, and being into philosophy when I was older.
So then, obviously, you wanted to go into school, which gathered, but then, so teaching philosophy. So then, just talk to me about the transition from the end of university, graduating, and then into teaching.
I think when I first went into teaching, RE was not as good as I was hoping it would be as a subject. I think that's quite a hard thing to explain. I wanted the children to be talking about the questions that interested me, and a lot of RE was simply just studying
text.
At first it was just studying Christianity, the Bible really, and Christianity. At that time, it was 1980s, schools hadn't really got into studying other faiths at that point. They did during the 1980s, we got into looking at other faiths as well. But at first it was really studying fact or information rather than discussion and debate. And I wanted to get get children talking about their own ideas.
So how were you trying to get? Well, actually, let's take it back a tiny bit. So you wanted to get into teaching and you wanted to do philosophy.
Yeah.
So then. You picked RE, religious education.
Yeah.
Then when you got into it and you realised that it's not actually what you thought it would be, like your preconceived thought, was there like a feeling of like, I'm just going to quit and then do something else, or were you like, just going to stick with it?
Teaching, it's tough at first. Going into when you're 20, I was 22. Going into a school and teaching teenagers was tough. I found it really tough. 22.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I found it really tough at first. I found it really tough in terms of kids' behaviour, getting behaviour management right. That bit was really tough. That took a lot of persevering. I had to work really hard at that to get that right. And it's to go into school and face that difficulty is quite challenging. You could easily give up, and I think probably in the first year or so I could have easily given up. I think because it was hard work. There were classes that I came across that wouldn't do anything I wanted them to do, and that was really hard. It was a very steep learning curve,
especially when they're not well, you're not teaching what you actually want to teach, and the conversation that you actually want to have. So that's what I'm trying to get at is why not quit? No, why carry on?
Because I was determined to make. I was determined that I was going to wanted to achieve it.
Okay.
And I didn't want to quit. I wanted to be a school teacher. And I wanted to be successful, but I had to work really hard at it.
But there was no like a plan B. There was no like it was just teaching and that's it. I'm gonna go for that.
Yeah.
And just work as hard as I can to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was lucky, I think, probably in a way that after a couple of years, I had the opportunity to move to a different school, and it was a much more. The staff were much younger. The school I first taught in, most of the staff were they seemed very old at the time, probably in their 30s, 40s, 50s. There weren't many young staff, and the school was quite set in its ways.
So you were kind of alien to the kind of community, basically.
Yeah, I felt like a bit like
an outsider.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, there were some people there, some staff who were very nice and so on, but the type of education the school was doing, certainly for RE, I wanted to do something different than that. I got the opportunity to move to a different school after about 3 years, and circumstances meant that I became head of RE because the head of RE.
But before we get, because you kind of fast forward the story, but you know when you first get into a school and like you realize that you're teaching.
Yeah.
When you're doing the teaching training, was the training beforehand?
Yes.
Yeah, like working with children.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
So then, how was it teaching them the art of discipline? Like, from obviously there's one thing, obviously saying that I'm going to discipline a kid by sending him to detention or doing other things.
Yeah.
Did that come naturally to you? Because I feel like that's like a hard thing to do. Because when you look at the child, you're thinking like, they're kind of what's the word, like not a victim, but they're kind of like they don't really know any better. So it's kind of like it's hard to kind of discipline them. So how was you kind of like balancing that?
Yeah.
Where do you come from?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's.
When you first actually have to hand out detention or shout at them or like tell them this or this that, like how was it?
I think the hardest thing I found was being consistent. So you there's a danger as a young teacher. You tell kids you're going to do something if they don't stop doing it, and you end up not doing it. Exactly. And I learned that very quickly. That whatever you say, you've got to be consistent.
You've got to back up.
But I think what you've got to do, the most important thing for discipline, I think, is to teach good lessons. If you teach good lessons, and you still have, but still kids will muck about and mess around and not want to do RE because some kids think RE, I don't want to do RE. But it's teaching good lessons. I learned that very quickly. If you get your teaching right, you have less problems with behaviour. But it's just tough, yeah.
But how do you teach a good lesson? How do you even get there?
I think you've got to look at it from when I was doing my teacher training. One thing that stuck in my mind, somebody said to us, one of the lecturers said one day, that when you're teaching something, you got to start from where the kids are rather than when you are. So rather than if I was teaching about an aspect of say Islam, say, which I eventually did because more study of other faiths came in. Rather than starting at the beginning for me, you start with something that will interest the kids.
Oh, okay.
So
give me an example. So you say Islam Day, like if you're teaching an introductory lesson on Islam, like how do you...
I might go for an aspect of Islam which is something that is in the news. For example, why do Muslims fast, or why do Muslim women dress in a particular way? I might start with something like that,
or something they've already seen before.
And discuss that rather than starting with Muslims believe in one God, and these are the 5 pillars of Islam, and so on. And I think, and that may not be I'm not sure if that's a good example, but I think you've got to start with the kids. You've got to start with something that they can relate to, I think.
It's like giving the carrot, that's an example in terms of like you give them a carrot and then you kind of draw them in and then you can give all the information afterwards. Instead of just coming on with the information because then they just run away.
So if I was teaching you about the life of Jesus or something, if I started, Jesus was born in Bethlehem and so on, I wouldn't. But something I used to do is an example. I'd start with the first lesson. I would show the children, the kids, 5 or 6 different portraits of Jesus done during history. One of them was an African Jesus, one of them was an Indian Jesus, an Indian image of Jesus. Some of them were more sort of traditional European images of Jesus, and say what's the connection between all these pictures, and as a starting point, and get the kids to talk about it. And when I told them they were all portraits of Jesus, they would say, well, now how can that be? Because Jesus had long hair and a beard and blue eyes, sort of thing. So no, starting somewhere where the kids can relate to. I discovered.
Throwing them a carrot.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So then, did you get the idea yourself in terms of the 6 Jesuses, like in terms of the versions?
I probably took, like most teachers, I probably found it somewhere else and nicked somebody else's idea, I think.
So how quick was you when you realised that like the onus is on you to intrigue the children instead of just telling them a lesson?
Yeah.
And what kind of pushed you? Because obviously when you're in teaching, you kind of get overruled by the pressure, marking, this, that, all these other extra things, and then you don't really focus on the actual lesson itself. So, I got 2 questions. Number 1, why did you keep on track and kind of stay consistent and like improve as you're going along?
Yeah.
And number 2, when did you realise that the lessons were in your mistakes as a teacher and kind of ironing them out? Like they kind of work similar, the questions.
Okay. Can you repeat the first one again?
Yeah. I'll start number 1.
Okay.
So number 1 is realising your own mistakes. Like when you first come in and the lessons you're teaching were not maybe as engaging as they could have been.
Yeah, I think as a teacher, you know in a lesson whether you know pretty early on in a lesson if you know if the kids aren't engaged, you know if they're not. Even if they're quiet, you know if they're not engaged.
So what made you push to kind of get them engaged? Because a lot of teachers would just kind of like, I'm getting paid, and then I'm just gonna go home and just carry on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's a hell of a life, isn't it? You know, it'd be a hell of a to come in every day and sit and stand in front of a group of kids who didn't want to know what you do and weren't interested in what you're doing. Yeah. That would be terrible. That would be really demoralising. I think trial and error, really, trying to find ways. I mean, teachers have courses and in service training about teaching methods, and we had quite a lot of that in the 80s, and some of the ideas I got came from that. Some of the ideas I got, I suppose, came from experience of teaching bad lessons and trying to find ways of teaching them better. But it was a gradual thing. It wasn't straight. No, over time, probably over 10 years, really. That to reach a point when I was doing that consistently.
But so then, when it became consistent, how was you trying to find the journey? Because obviously it's become consistent now. You're getting everyone engaged, well as most more students as you can. Yeah. But then, and you're teaching good lessons, but then the topic doesn't change. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're saying the same kind of things. So then, when it comes like a cycle and it's the same thing day in day out, when do you find the new joy and the new aspiration to kind of improve?
I was lucky enough, I think, to be when I became head of RE. So I was sort of head of RE in my sort of early 30s, really.
But how did that come about, actually? Because you mentioned it before.
Yeah.
When you kind of fast forwarded.
Yeah. The first bit was by chance, really. I went to another school. I was only in my sort of mid-20s. I went to another school, and there was a head of RE and me. Yeah. And the head of RE retired very suddenly. He was off work ill for a long time. And then and when he came back, he gave up being head of RE. And then the only other RE teacher in school was me. So I sort of became head of RE, and I was in my mid-20s. So that was very suddenly. Then I was about 30, I think. I moved to another school, a bigger school with a bigger RE department.
But how was it becoming head of RE in the first place? Like had that responsibility? I feel like it's just another title. And
it was hard because the responsibility of making sure that you did the things, making sure reports were done, going to meetings, having to write reports on how the RE exam results, things like that. No, that was quite. I enjoyed it, but it was a big responsibility for somebody in their mid-20s, really. And it was only, I don't think it would happen in many subjects because RE mostly has only 1 or 2 people teaching it. It wasn't like running a big department like history or geography. It was just me and somebody else. But it was still quite a big responsibility. But it was by chance.
But then when you took on the responsibility, because number one, you have to take the responsibility, because you could easily say no, I don't want to do it, and then you have to be someone else, or whatever. But when you took the opportunity and then you realise that it's actually more than you actually bargained for, and you realise that the actual workload, how was you kind of managing that? Because that's a different kind of feeling.
Yeah, it's just quite hard to manage. I mean, I suppose.
Because like, when you mention it and say like, I had to do the extra reports, do this, do that, it seems like they're all mundane tasks, like they're all something extra on your workload. So how was it kind of like doing them tasks and then going to meetings and expressing yourself in the meetings and kind of enacting change that way?
I think one of the good things about the school, it was a school with a lot of young staff, and it was a school which had was a progressive school in lots of ways. It had lots of ideas. And they were ahead of other schools in terms of the way they did education in lots of ways. I worked with a really good history department colleague. He was head of department. He was young as well, a bit older than me, but he was young. He worked really hard and had a really good idea. So I didn't feel like I was on my own. I was working with colleagues in what was an inspiring school, really.
So then, fast forward again, and you got head of RE
in another school, in a bigger school, and I was lucky enough to be able to appoint another member of staff who was brilliant. And that you said earlier about what makes you keep going. Well, working alongside another colleague who was brilliant was inspirational as well. So it was inspiring to keep going and making RE as good as we could.
So you both had the same vision.
Yeah, and this member of staff was very much up for it as well. So we worked well together. And I was lucky enough then to appoint other staff to teach RE because the RE department expanded. And again, I was lucky enough to be able to...
So how was you managing the team now? Because before it was like you and one other person.
Yeah.
Now you actually got other staff and other members.
Yeah.
So it's a bigger workload and a bigger...
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Egos and different things.
And by this time I had young kids as well. So it was hard. It was tough. It was, it was... it was come home from work.
And then you imagine another team.
Yeah, then start work. Spend time with the children, and then when they were in bed, start work again. So it was a case of working. I'm sure lots of our teachers were the same. With in that situation, it was working from 9 to 11 in the evening or something like that, or every evening. And that's tough, but as something as a younger person, I think I coped with quite well as a way. When I was older, when I was in my 50s and tried to do the same, I couldn't do it. I couldn't work late at night then. By then, I was done in.
You're burnt out.
Yes, I was. But it was tough. It was teaching well is really, really demanding.
So how do you keep that drive going? Because obviously you're at 20, you're kind of reinvigorated and you got that inspiration and you're all positive and ready to go. But then at 30, 35, when it's 20 years in, at 40, when it's 20 years in, then it's a different kind of drive that you have to kind of push forward. Yeah,
I moved schools when in my early 40s to become the head of sixth form. So that was a different sort of job. I hadn't done anything like that before. I hadn't been a pastoral head before. So I suppose moving to a new school, that was inspiration to keep going, I suppose.
But then the workload got bigger because obviously you've been managing a whole department.
Yeah.
So then dealing with people's egos and the pressures of actually being the one in charge.
Yeah.
That's a whole different kettle of fish. So then how was that adaptation like?
It's tough. I mean, it's tough. I think the honest answer, sometimes it was like feeling like you were hanging on by your fingernails really to keep going because there were all sorts of pressures. But you have to keep doing it because if you don't keep doing it, you won't be able to do it. If you don't keep going every day, then it would become impossible to catch up.
So what was the mindset like? So it was very like I try to keep pushing every day.
Yeah. Just little things. Yeah. And you know that there's going to be a holiday, though school teachers' holidays aren't as big as people imagine. Yeah. But you did know there was going to be a break.
Okay. So you just kind of keep pushing to that break and then have that break.
Well, the challenge is you've got to make sure. I don't know whether I achieve this or not properly, but you've got to make sure that you have a balance between work and home and family.
So then how was that balance? How you kind of achieved it? Or did you?
I don't know. I'm not sure if I did. At times, no, I think. At times, not. You've got to make sure that I think the whole school holidays were. My wife's teacher was a teacher as well. So we had the school holidays with our children.
How was it on a day-to-day from Monday to Friday while you're actually working?
It was tough. You had to make sure that you managed your time well. You had to make sure that you when you came home, you did give time to your children.
But how do you shut off? Because obviously you manage the whole department and then you're coming home and you got to ignore all that and just focus on the kids. Like, how was that transition? Because it's hard for anyone.
Yeah.
So for you, how was it? Like, how do you shut off?
It's tough. I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know how you done it?
No. I look back. I look back now and think, my children have grown up there. They don't live with us anymore. But I look back and think, well, how did we do it? How did we both work?
Yeah.
Bring up two kids and survive. How did we do it?
Yeah. So you don't know.
No. I don't know. You just do it. I think you do it because you're driven to do it. You believe that you want it. You should do it. I think.
You just have responsibility. And just taking it.
No, I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
So how did that transition from head of RE to deputy head? How did that come about?
So I went to be head of sixth form in the school, and
Again, like you're taking on different responsibilities.
Yeah.
So then each one they're getting bigger and bigger.
Yes.
So was there ever a point where you're thinking, like, this is already hard enough for me, I'm just gonna stick here, or like was it always like I'll keep going? Like
I think I was
the struggle before, but then you kept going. So
yeah, I think I was quite ambitious. I wanted to make progress. I wanted to make progress in my career. I think so. I was quite ambitious to make progress.
So then that transition again from head of RE to deputy head.
Yeah.
How did that kind of come about, and the interview process? Like, what was the whole thing like?
So I went to be head of sixth form in the school. Then after a few years I applied to be deputy head. I went for other schools to be interviewed. I didn't get a couple of jobs I didn't get. But then the deputy head job came up in the school I was working in, and I got that. So it was an internal appointment.
Okay.
So then, still a tough process, still a tough interview process, but.
Yeah. So then, how was the interview process like? If you look back, I can remember like how you kind of transpired. Like in terms of like, were you sitting at home revising after you done your work?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you obviously still have responsibilities.
Yeah.
And then like revising on the interview technique and how you speak. And, or did you know that it was a shame that you were actually going to get the job?
No, I didn't. I was going to get a job. No, I didn't know. It was a proper competitive process. So yeah, it was at home. Reading all the stuff, getting ready, thinking what the questions might be, doing all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
So then, how has it been a deputy head? And what are the responsibilities of the deputy head?
Right,
well, the head of RE, you're head, obviously the religious education aspect, and you're in charge of that. But then going from that to head of sixth form to deputy head.
Yeah.
Well, actually, first of all, head of sixth form. What are the responsibilities there?
So it was for the pastoral care of the students, but also making sure that what they were getting the academic teaching.
We're thinking about that.
They should do. So it meant watching teachers teach, working with the staff to make sure they were delivering the right stuff and the right quality to make sure that the students got the results they ought to get, and looking at the data about the results, but also the pastoral care of the kids as well.
But then when you're having difficult conversations with teachers that are not maybe performing to the levels required, how was that conversation like, and was it easy, was it hard? Or?
Honestly, it varied. I mean, I think the way to start those conversations is always trying to find a positive to start with. Say, if you watch lessons, this is what I thought was good about the lesson. But you also have to be honest and say, this is what I think you need to improve. And sometimes...
Was it hard for you at the start?
Yeah, it's hard to do that. It's hard to tell somebody that you think they need to improve, because they would say to you, well, no, how do you know? So I think a really important thing, if you're a deputy head or a head of sixth form, is that you've also got to be seen to be somebody who can teach. Because if they don't see you teaching, then how can you possibly go and tell them how to teach?
So then, again, it's extra workload, extra management. So then, will you develop the management skills in terms of managing the team and managing the whole environment? Is that something that happened over time? Or?
I think it happens over time. The teachers don't really have much in terms of training in terms of that.
Exactly. So then how was it actually you like developing yourself?
It's developing yourself. You learn by trial and error, I think.
Now,
you make some... No, I made some terrible mistakes with kids and with staff in terms of trying to sort out problem of children who weren't working and getting their parents in and talking to their parents, and sometimes I got it wrong, and sometimes with teachers I got it wrong when I tried to explain to them they should do it differently. You learn by your mistakes, because teaching, there's nothing in teaching really to teach you to be a manager. Not really. You have to learn it on the job, I think.
So then once you had them difficult moments where you maybe kind of never got a situation right, how was you navigating that? Like, was there a feeling of like, sorry, I'm trying to go back to doing my RE teaching job? And
no. I think you have to be honest. You have to be honest, and you have to. Sometimes you have to apologise and tell people I got that wrong, and that's quite difficult to do. But you do.
So how do you drop the ego and actually apologise?
Well, you have to. I mean, I think if
you say you have to, but it's another thing having to, another thing doing it.
Well, it's quite difficult sometimes. Yeah, sometimes you have to admit to. There were times when I had to apologise to somebody when it wasn't really my fault, because I think it goes with the territory. If you're in charge of something, you have to carry the can sometimes. You have to carry the can for other people's mistakes. That's difficult to do.
But where did that learning come from? That you have to carry the can?
I think it's experience. I think
no, but there's one thing experiencing and another thing actually taking it on board and like taking it upon yourself to develop that skill and use it. Do you get my point from? Like,
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Knowing it and then another thing doing it. So
Yeah.
for you, how was that transition from knowing it and then I'm actually going to apologize and be the bigger man, even though it might not be your fault?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. Sometimes it was difficult to do that.
Yeah.
Particularly, if you come across a really stroppy member of staff,
exactly,
which you would, you do in teaching. Yeah.
Was that point where you were like in the beginning where you were kind of ruthless and a bit more hot-headed or like a bit more like not understanding of other people's situations and their kind of experiences? And
I don't know. I'm sure there was. I'm sure there was. You do learn by you can't manage everybody the same way. One thing I learned is you can't deal with everybody the same way. So if you're talking to somebody, I don't know, in their 20s who's taught a bad lesson, and you talk to somebody in their 50s who's been an experienced teacher who's had a bad lesson, you've got to approach it differently. I think I learned that early on, that you can't, because some people, I'm sure it's the same in lots of jobs, some people manage everybody the same way.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. You have to manage people according to who the person is. I don't mean manage them in a softer way. I don't mean you let off the 50-year-old.
No.
But you have to find a different way of doing it.
You have to find like a common ground that works best for the team.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, how long were you a deputy head for?
Sort of thing. 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
So
let me get that right. No, 8 years, in fact.
Yeah. So then, what kind of changes happened? Like, what's the responsibility of a deputy head?
Well, when I first got the job, there were 2 deputy heads in school. So I was the curriculum deputy. So that was making sure the curriculum was, the whole curriculum worked. I did the timetable. I was responsible for quality teaching and learning, making sure teaching and learning was the quality it ought to be, that staff were teaching properly. So those were the main responsibilities. And the other deputy head was the pastoral deputy head. So he looked at people welfare, safeguarding, behaviour, discipline, those sort of things. But because the school was financially in trouble, he left for another job. He left to be a head, the other deputy head. And so we only had one deputy head after that. So I ended up being responsible for the lot, effectively. So the curriculum and for pastoral care.
So how was it? That's a massive responsibility, because that's basically the direction of the school.
Yeah.
So then, how did you manage it? Simple question, but like you've done it for 10 years or so.
Yeah.
So then, how was it like from your initial expectation in the job to what it actually was like, and the difference you kind of made from when you started to when you ended?
Yeah. It was tough. It was difficult. There were some things I had to learn quickly. I'd never dealt with children who were being possibly being abused before. I'd never dealt with that before, and talking to social services about people's welfare. I'd never done that before. So it was a very steep learning curve. I had to learn very quickly to do those things. And
how did you dissociate emotion from it? In terms of not carrying the whole media, like that burden of like their story.
It's very hard. There were some that you couldn't not take home. You had to take home with you.
So how do you deal with it?
I don't know. You have to just get on with it, I think.
But you said that for a lot of stuff. But how do you get on with it? Like, how do you keep moving?
I don't know. In teaching, if you're a deputy head, every day anything can happen. I could go to work in the morning and say, "Well, today I'm going to do this, and this," and I get there and I did none of it because something would happen. There might be an issue, a behaviour issue, or there might be a fight, or there might be a safeguarding issue with a pupil being and every day is different. So next day you go to work and something else happens. So you have to keep moving. And some of the things that happen really do affect you badly. You can't not go to school tomorrow. You have to go to tomorrow and deal with that.
You have to though. You could just quit. It's again the same thing. Like for you, I feel like you've never had the thinking of quit. You would have just kept like, oh, I have to do it.
There's a practical reason that I had to pay a mortgage, and pay for my kids and so on. But I don't know. I think you just, if you're committed to something, you keep doing it, don't you? I think.
Where did you see that?
Well, what would a 50-year-old man do if he stopped going to work? What would he What would he do the next day?
Exactly. But then it's dealing with that in your own head though, because what I'm trying to get at is there's.
Oh, it was very stressful. Yeah.
It's stressful, but then there's a point where you just feel like study. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, because obviously you do it day in day out and you keep coming tomorrow and you keep going up, but there comes a time where you feel just like it feels too much sometimes. Like,
there were days when you felt like sod it. Yeah.
So then how do you overcome them days? Like obviously you kind of brush it off, go to sleep and go again.
Yeah.
But that mindset and that thinking, how does it develop over time? Because obviously you can do it a few times, but then you might get hit with something that's massive.
Yeah.
Where you feel like you can't get over it, but then somehow you obviously you did.
Yeah.
But then so how is it dealing with that thing and getting over it?
I think I'm not sure if this is a very good answer, but I think you're in a bit of a bubble when you're teaching. You do go to work in the morning, come home at night, go to sleep, get up the next day and go to work.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just keep going at it. And then when you stop and reflect, you think, well, blimmin' heck, how did I get through that? How did I survive that?
Maybe just not overthinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when you kind of just like, you think about it, you digest it, but then you kind of just ignore it from your mind. When you say like, sometimes you go, what's happening to different children and students home, it's kind of like just pushing that aside maybe, and then kind of just pushing forward and just, because the next day there's different set of challenges and different things going on. So
I don't think it was
in the back of your mind.
I don't think it was a conscious push aside. I think you just had to get on. You just had to go back the next day and deal with what was happening.
Yeah, I think it's not overthinking. I think especially with you, I feel like you just never overthink it. Because for you, it was like, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do that. Then you kind of just kept busy with different things, and then like, so when the calm down happened and you stepped out of education, what was that like? Because this whole time you've been doing different things each day, every day, and then now you're just chilling at home. So.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the first bit you just said there, I think I did overthink it sometimes. You know, I did have sleepless nights when I did overthink it. But you have to somehow keep going. So to try and explain that, I think it's a bit like, you're having to keep on the wagon. Really, you're hanging on to the wagon. If you put one foot off the wagon, then you're gone. You're completely gone. So every day, the job was a bit like that. You have to stay on.
So then, when you came to actually that calm down and moving out of education, how was that transition like? Because obviously you've been on this wagon, like you said, this whole time, and you've been steering it and you're taking it forward. But then now it's a calm down, like it's like 1 week you're working, the next week you're not. Yeah. So then once that kind of transition happened, how did you get through it? Because now there's emptiness, there's nothing going on. Yeah, I mean it was tough because I said to you before we started that the school I was in, we were inspected. And we failed our inspection because we hadn't made, it was a challenge school, deprived area, and we hadn't made as much progress as Ofsted wanted us to make. So the school failed its inspection. The head had to leave more or less straight away, and eventually the new head decided he wanted a new deputy head, so I had to move on as well. That was tough. Just doing the job every day and suddenly not being able to do that job and being told you need to move on was really tough. That was really hard to get through. I was lucky in a way that another school wanted me to go and work for them as deputy head. So I moved to another school for another couple of years on a short-term contract to fill a gap they had. So that bit was really tough emotionally and sort of just in terms of handling the sudden change. When I finally finished, I worked part-time for a while at the end, for a couple of days a week. That was good because it was a gradual come down. It wasn't like a steep... No, it was a gradual thing. I thought that I would find it really difficult not to work anymore, but in fact I didn't. I enjoyed it. And it took me a while, but I did. I'm glad I retired when I did. I retired a bit early. And I was 57 when I stopped working, so... bit earlier than I planned. I planned I'd work till 60, but I'm glad I did. It was a good thing to do, so I could do other things. So then, when you say was that gradual come down, preconceived thought, like once you got, you were taken away from the first school that you were at, and then you went on a deputy head short-term basis. Yeah. Was your thinking then in that transition that I'm actually gonna like just come out of it again? No, it was just the school the school had a particular problem where one of their senior teachers wasn't able to work there anymore, and they left, and so they had a gap. Yeah. And so I went back and filled that gap on a short-time basis after I finished working full-time. Oh, so that short-time basis was part-time? Yes. Okay. No, so the short-time basis was full-time. Yeah. But then at the end of the full-time bit, then there was an opportunity to work part-time. Yeah, so then why join on a short-term basis? Like, why not carry on and like, why go on that calm down after? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because you were doing it full-time for 2 years or 3 years. Or 2 years, yeah. 2 years. So they want to carry on doing it?
I think that it was partly because the school needed somebody to do it, and I got on very well with the head. And
they want to carry on, like pass them 2 years and 3 years, 4 years, and make it 5, 6, 7, 8.
Because I had the opportunity to retire. I decided I was going to retire. It was always a 2-year agreement. So I decided at that point I would retire. And I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if that was the right thing to do. But I'm glad I did. Afterwards.
Was that a knock-on effect from obviously how it ended with your previous school?
Yeah, I think so. Partly, it was
felt like it was just too much. And
it was it was an opportunity to retire, and I thought, well, let's take it. It was partly that, I think. It was partly because I wanted to do other things. I didn't, I'd worked in teaching for 35 years, and it was an opportunity to do something else.
And if you had to give any advice, obviously teaching for 35 years, but to any young teachers or people that are aspiring to become teachers, in terms of like what it's actually like and the lessons they can learn and that you can pass down to them to kind of take forward?
I think one piece of advice is I would say that you probably unless you're very certain you want to do it, don't go straight from university into teaching. Do something else a bit first if you can. I think you need a bit of time doing other things in order to be the most effective you can be as a teacher. I think advice I would give as a teacher is don't be afraid to ask for advice. I mean, that's I think sometimes people in school, people when they become teachers are afraid to admit they may have problems or may have weaknesses or things that they're not good at. Because I've never really worked with any teacher who doesn't have issues when they start. It's very rare for a teacher to go straight into the job
and be perfect.
I mean, I don't think that very rarely happens. But don't be afraid to ask for advice. And make sure make sure you try and talk to people you know are going to be supportive, because some teachers in school are very supportive of you when you're a young teacher, and some people are less supportive. So make sure choose wisely, but don't be afraid to ask for advice and stick at it, because it does get easier. It's tough at first. It's really tough. The amount of time you have to give to teaching early in your career is a real shock, because you go from being in a different sort of job or being a student to suddenly working a very long week with a lot of work at home and marking and so on. But stick at it, because it does get easier. And take advice.
I think that's great advice. And so thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story with us.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thanks.